Well, hello! Today I thought it'd be fun to kind of go through some build your own palettes that I've made recently. I feel like it's been a while since I've done one of these videos. I will say I already have all three of these picked out, and the theme I was going for is like fall season palettes. So I've got three different sizes here and three different like categories within that theme. And if you want to see what I've made, then go ahead and just keep on watching. I say let's start smallest to largest, and I think that this is a nice kind of fall cover here. I love foxes, so I had to get this one from Menagerie when it came out. I will say the inside doesn't quite match it. Da, 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 da. Here we are. So this is my first fall themed palette, and I wanted to go with something kind of grungy and like deeper jewel tones like fall, but I wanted to kind of challenge myself to not do the traditional color story we think of when it comes to fall, like the green, red, orange, yellow of the leaves, you know? So this is my take on a like alternative color fall palette. Let's go ahead and swatch it. All right, first up, we've got this shade from Looksy Beauty called Get Naked. If you know me and you've seen any of my videos, you know I always want a highlight shade. So this is that for this one. It's kind of a cream shade with a little bit of like a green twist to it. So I thought it would be nice to highlight a lot of these like green leaning looks. Next is Autumn Equinox by Copacetic Cosmetics, and I'll go ahead and pull out the mirror. Hopefully, maybe if I pop this out, you can see the multi-chromeness. Not really, honestly, can you? Here, okay, let me do some experimenting. All right, I decided the best way to show the shifts really fast is on my hand. So you can see it kind of goes like an orangey gold to more like lime green, and then a little bit like dark blue on the edges, which I'm not sure if I'm picking up quite as well, but that's the multi-chromeness. Now I'll swatch it on my wrist. Next, we've got a matte that makes it into a lot of my videos. This is from Terra Moons, and this is the shade Shire. Just a really cool like acid green, yellow green, I guess. Last up, we've got this Depotted shade. I'm pretty sure this is the one Depotted from the new Glaminatrix All Natural palette, but it's just like a kind of deep gray toned green. Next, we've got one of the newer Terra Moons shades. This is Atomic Division. It's like a deep kind of blue jean blue, almost something a little tiny bit like indigo or purple about it. And then it's got a green and yellow and a little bit of an orange sparkle in it. Super pretty. Really been enjoying the new shades that I picked up from the summer. Next is Copacetic Cosmetic Blossom. This is like that purple green type of duochrome, but it's a little bit deeper than some of the others I have, and I thought it went perfect with this grungy vibe. The next matte is Depotted from Simply Posh Fairy Tale Fairies, or Fairy Tales palette, some order of that, but it's a really cool, like deep teal blue. And then lastly, we've got a Nabla single that my friend Olivia gave me, and this is called Capsize, and it's just like a taupey, mauve, purpley kind of shade. Next, we've got the shade Hydra from Terra Moons. It's one of those ones that kind of goes from like a burgundy to a like red leaning purple to a kind of blue shift. I find that that one is a crumblier Terra Moons shade than some of the rest. This is the shade Ballistic from Shine by SD. A really, really pretty shade. It kind of is a multi-chrome that goes from like green to blue to purple to red. Next, I honestly don't know where this is depotted from, but it's just a dark olive leaning green, but There is something almost foresty about it too, almost like a Kelly green maybe. And then lastly, we have this little tiny shade depotted from an old ColourPop palette. I honestly couldn't tell you which one off the top of my head. But here is this full palette. So we've got that highlight shade all the way down, kind of like purples and greens and a little bit of blues. Still that jewel tone, just a little bit of a twist on the normal fall palette. Let me know what you think of this one down in the comments. So that last palette was 12 pans. This one is 16, so we're getting a little bit larger. And this one is very much your stereotypical colored palette for fall. This was kind of inspired by my drive home from work today. I drive past this road with a lot of really tall, like established foliage, like oak trees and sycamores and things like that. So today I noticed that the leaves are finally turning, and it kind of inspired this whole video, honestly. I had the other two palettes before, but after that I sat down today and I was like, all right, I'm gonna actually do a typical fall themed palette, and this is it. So enough talking about it, let's get into it. This first shade is depotted from a Profusion palette, the Neons palette, and it's just kind of a bright mid-tone, leaning a little light green. I will say the Profusion shades have to be built up a little bit, but it's basically just a lime green. Next, we've got Terra Moon's Hot Spiced Cider, and you may notice I kind of wanted to imitate the kind of life of a leaf in the fall time. So we start off with this green kind of color up in the top, then we go to yellows and oranges, and then reds and browns at the bottom. This one, I count it as a green, even though it does have that red base, but honestly, the duochrome I thought would just be a kind of must-have for this palette, because this is like an epitome of fall in an eyeshadow, you know? Next one I feel like I haven't used in a while. This is Sydney Grace Gisa Lang. It's a really nice bright yellow, leaning a little mustardy, but also still kind of somehow pastel. It's really, really a cool shade. This last shade is depotted from the Glamlight Chocolate Martini palette, and it's an orange with a gold sparkle in it. Again, it has to be in a fall palette, right? Next, we have another Terra Moon's shade. This is Mi Gente. It's a really nice dark green, something just really truly neutral about it. It doesn't lean too blue, doesn't lean too yellow. Really a great one. Those Terra Moon's shades are quite crumbly, but very, very pigmented. Next, we've got kind of an olive green shade. This is from the Mountain Trail set by Sydney Grace. Actually, both of the ones that I'm swatching are, and I don't know what either of them is called, but just know they're both from that bundle. Last in this row, is Good Intentions by Shine by SD. It's kind of an orange, gold, red multi-chrome with a gray base. Next is a Nomad single eyeshadow. I finally got to try Nomad. They started selling single shadows, and I got this bright yellow from their Costa Rica palette. It's called Toucan, and I picked it because when I was driving home today, I noticed like some of the leaves as they're turning to green, like from yellow, they almost go kind of fluorescent looking in a way, and so I really wanted to capture that element in my palette. Next to that is the Touch of Glam shade, Watermelon Sorbet, also from my friend Olivia. Shout out to Olivia for a lot of singles in my collection. Next, we've got Tiger by Looksy. It's just kind of a Cheeto dust orange matte. Almost kind of has something mac and cheese about it too, like Kraft mac and cheese. Next to that is a shade that is depotted from the Friendcation palette, really throwing it back. It's that red sparkly shade in there, and I just thought it was a great kind of deeper shimmer option for this palette. This next one is depotted, and to be quite honest, I don't know where it's from, but it's a deep burgundy that almost leans a little bit brown, kind of adding a neutral option to this palette, or neutral leaning. This next one is Mesa from Looksy. It's a really nice like blood orange kind of color. I guess maybe something pumpkin-y about it too, meaning it's more like yellow toned than like red toned, but so pretty. Next to that, we've got the Monarch, also from Looksy. I've got a lot of Looksy in this one. This is a like, how do I describe this color? It's a bronze or copper, but leaning a little bit burgundy. But there's also a kind of like green shift on the edges of this one, which is why I thought it'd be a good addition, kind of tying in the red and green. Last but not least is another depotted shade, and I don't know what palette this is from, but it's a beautiful, really deep plum color that I thought rounded out this palette perfectly. I went ahead and zoomed out a little bit more so that way we can see the palette all together. And here it is, my typical fall themed palette. I feel like this Good Intentions shade looks a little out of place because it's shining a little bit more like pinky red, but know that it does shift orange and gold as well. But other than that, one that kind of sticks out a little bit, I love this palette. Let me know what you guys think of it in the comments below, and at the end you can tell me which one's your favorite too. Last but not least, we've got our classic spooky season fall themed palette. This is also our largest palette, coming in at a whopping 30 shades, so we've almost doubled what we were working with for that last palette. Go ahead and get started though. So this first shade is depotted from the orange ColourPop palette. This is like supposed to be kind of a true orange, but it leans a little red in practice to me. Next up, we've got another depotted shade. I'm pretty sure this comes from the Violet Voss palette. It's just like a mauve kind of gray toned purple leaning shade. There's a word to describe that. I just don't know it, but there it is. Next up, we've got Veil Nebula from Terra Moons. It's got a really deep purple base with a blue, green, and gold sparkle in it. Perfect for fall, but also something kind of dark and mysterious and spooky about it to me. Next, we've got this really light green to use as a transition color. This is Sea Breeze from Sydney Grace. I lusted over this shade for forever, and I actually have it now. Full disclosure, it is a new day. I was editing the video and realized I didn't swatch this shade. This is Dragon Slayer by Looksy, and even though it's not going to be in any of the rest of the video, I figured I'd show it to you just in case you were curious. It's a green sparkle that shifts to blue with a like blackened purpley base. Next up, we've got another shade depotted from that same orange ColourPop palette. This one is a bright, light yellow orange. After that, we've got Zira from Divina Cosmetics. This is an iridescent multichrome that goes from like an orange to a green with a little bit of gold in between the two. Really, really cool. I never see the green quite as much in this. It leans pretty orange. I have seen it a little bit though. And then lastly, this is a shade depotted from the Norvina palette from ABH a long time ago. But I thought this really deep, grungy purple could add a lot of dimension to this palette. Next, we've got one of the new Looksy multichromes. This is Off the Grid. It goes from an orange to a gold to a green. Again, orange and green, I thought it would be perfect for this spooky palette, and the black base on this one really, again, gives it that grunge. This is a really interesting shade. It's like a brown toned warm green. I don't know how to describe it other than that. If you see it next to neutrals, it looks a little green. If you see it next to greens, it looks neutral. It's a really interesting one. Next is a shade depotted, or not depotted, it's a single shadow from Divina called Zorina. It's a pastel orange. It truly is a pastel orange too. I've talked about this before, but it doesn't look like a peach. It's so interesting. This next shade is depotted, but I don't remember from where. It's a really darkened deep purple, definitely a blue toned or like gray purple though, rather than like a warm tone purple like this one and this one. Next up, we've got another one from Divina. Lots of Divina in this one. This is Lynx. It's an orange with a gold and a green sparkle in it. Very, very pretty. Next, we've got two depotted ABH shades. Also a lot of ABH in this one, I feel like. This is a gray eyeshadow that also has the slightest touch of something brown and purple to it. Next to that, we've got a really deep black. I really enjoy this black from ABH. I think it's really pigmented, a pretty good one. And then lastly, we've got Laser from Glam Shop. It's a purple base with a ton of green sparkle in it and a pretty light base. It doesn't have a lot of opacity to it. All right, here are the top two rows of our spooky palette. We'll do the next two rows on my other arm so that way we can see all of the swatches together when I'm done. Next, we've got another one from that Fairy Tale Fairies collection or palette from Simply Posh. It's a really deep hunter green. Next, we've got more of a green apple kind of green. This is from the brand. I honestly can't even remember what this brand is. It was not my favorite. It doesn't have the name on the back, but I think it's called MJ. So here is the shade MJ. Next, we've got this beautiful silver. This is depotted from the Nabla Platinum Cuties palette. Really, really just sparkle-packed silver. Next, we've got one depotted from Beauty Bay. This is like a really deep purple with a black base and a ton of sparkle in it as well. Also a little tiny bit of silver sparkle in that one. Next up, we've got this depotted shade from a Milani palette. It's kind of like just a platinum white shimmer. Good for the inner corner. I'm gonna jump over here. This is another one from Terra Moons. It's a chameleon, very pretty with a dark blue base and a orange and kind of gold and almost a little bit of green in the shift. Next, we've got another from that Sydney Grace Mountain Trail bundle. Lots of greens in that bundle, so it worked out well for these fall palettes. It's kind of an olive green, but also a little bit more blue toned than you would think it would be for an olive, but there is that gold that makes it a little olivey to me. Maybe a kind of like hybrid between a spring green and an olive green. Next, we've got this really deep, almost like blackened orange. This is from the It's Belle Break the Rules palette. Very metallic, definitely a good one for spooky season. Next up, we've got one from Sydney Grace. It kind of looks like it's out of place, but I wanted a neutral option in such a large palette. And this is the shade Wondrous Night. Next, we've got a Terra Moons shadow. This is Ascension. It's a really light purple. Again, good for a transition or a fun like total pastel eye look. But really, really pretty. Not too pink leaning as well. I feel like a lot of lavenders can look a little pink. I think that whole last swatch might have been out of frame, so I need to make sure to keep my arm down. This is a like acid green, lime green kind of shade. It's from that same Simply Posh palette. Who knew there were so many spooky colors in there? Next, we've got this one. This is from JD Glow. This is the shade Lavender. I'm not currently buying from JD Glow, but I will let you know it is from them. Next, we've got this orange shade. This is depotted from the Alva palette from Odin's Eye Cosmetics. I got that palette when it was 50% off over the summer, and I went ahead and depotted it, and it works out perfectly for this color story. And this last shadow is depotted from Ace Beauté, the Classic Paradise palette, I think it's called. It's a really swampy green, like the most pea green, poop green I have, and a great way to round out the palette in my opinion. I kind of had to zoom way out, but here is the palette all together. Even though it's such a large palette, I feel like, I don't want to toot my own horn, but it seems like everything in it is different, and I think that it's cohesive without being repetitive. But let me know what you guys think. I'm open to criticism. If you think you're like, I don't know, I see some repetition, let me know for sure down in the comments below. And let me know, what is your favorite out of these 3 palettes? Let me go grab the others and we'll put them on screen all together. All right, here are all 3 palettes together. We've got the first one, which is kind of a grungy fall. This, which is a more traditional fall. And then lastly, our mega spooky themed palette. Let me know which of these was your favorite. Which would you be most likely to buy? Have you made any fall BYOPs? And what was your inspiration for yours if you did make them? If you did make them and you have an Instagram, feel free to tag me. I'd love to look at your different BYOPs. I hope you enjoyed mine. And until I see you next time, I hope that you stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy. Bye!